All right, so we will now get underway and begin with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, first up is approval of our consent agenda. Your motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we accept the consent agenda, except that we pull from the consent agenda the April and May 2025 financial reports, line items 2A and 2B pertaining to credit card payments.
Is there a second?
I guess point of information, why do you want to,
I want to
Do
discuss, I want to discuss it because of the credit card spend is going like this. We can talk about it.
oh, okay.
Is there a second to the motion?
Then I'll second that.
Perfect, thank you.
So,
Just
did
discuss-
Dee Dee get that? Sorry, that's
April
kind of
and May.
unusual.
Yeah.
So which ones are you pulling so that she can
April
be
and
sure in
May.
case there's a video?
April and May from the financial report. Here, I'll share this with you.
So the April is anticipated. I'm sorry, the May is estimated for May, so that's not a real number.
Understand.
Okay.
Any discussion on the motion itself?
Yeah, one, I'm trying to find it, and two, why? Is that in our papers?
It would have
No,
been in
no.
the packet,
It just
right,
came
the
up.
board packet that we got for those months.
It is in the board packet,
Well, the reports are, you mean.
the reports, yeah.
So which one did you want to look at first, John?
Well, we want to talk about April and May both, but we need a vote.
Same.
Yes, sorry, the copy was right, thank you.
We need to vote to pull it out.
Okay, so, any discussion on the motion? If not, we can vote on the motion and then move into.
Wait, no, wait. This motion, what is the motion? This
The
motion?
motion is to accept the consent agenda without the April
Gotcha,
2A and May 2B financial reports.
gotcha.
That was seconded by trustee Hernandez de Caro. So is there any further discussion on that motion to accept the consent agenda without those two items? And then we will discuss those two items. Hearing none, we can move to a roll call vote. Trustee Brazil?
Aye.
Trustee Garrity?
Aye.
Trustee Hagan?
Nay.
Trustee Hernandez de Caro.
Aye.
Motion carries. John, I will yield you the floor to discuss the items that have been removed from the consent agenda.
Sure. So, to this point, the board has had no transparency on credit card line items. It exists as a single line item with the amount, so we have no way of reviewing it really. In these 2 months, credit card spending has far exceeded the budget amount, 200% over anticipated budget for April, and 300% over the anticipated budget in May. Credit card spending as a single item does not provide the level of transparency to approve the spend, either in whole or part. That's why I want to pull it out. I want to talk about it.
Okay, so can you pick one or the other to start with, April or May? Because one is anticipated, so are we talking about the one that was already spent first?
Right.
And then which item is it here?
Why don't I just go right into my motion and then we can talk about that. What we're really looking for is to understand why credit card spending is so dramatically different from month to month. And we don't have that visibility. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make my motion and then we can discuss that. I move that the interim director and/or the director of finance provide requested information on library credit cards to include the total number of credit cards issued, what institution the cards are issued from, all credit card invoices and receipts for April and May, and QuickBooks in-person access to that information to be provided by the end of business day, June 3rd. you have a copy of this motion?
Yes,
Is there a second to that motion?
I'm just gonna tell you right now, we can't do it that quickly.
Is there a second to the motion that's on the floor?
Second.
Trustee Patel, any discussion on the motion?
I think we need to hear what the fiscal realities are.
What's the timeline? How quickly do you think?
Okay, well, first of all, this is a bunch of different things that you're asking for here that are totally unrelated from each other and unrelated to approving. So pulling it out at this point is not the appropriate time to make a motion for a board action. So the only action that can be taken as a part of the consent agenda is either to approve or not approve the report. This is not a time to bring up another action. So we could add credit cards to a future agenda and then bring you the parts of this or explain why this information is not accessible or is accessible. So the total number of credit cards issued, who has them, what institutions, that's in the audit. It's already public. It's in your packets. You can look back from last year. The new updated version will be in this year's audit. That's something the auditor looks at every year, okay? So that's something that is already publicly available. The credit card invoices, we can give you those. That's not a problem. And QuickBooks in-person access to that information. This is something that you brought up actually in a budget committee meeting that we don't understand how it's related to the budget or why it's an issue. So QuickBooks is just the system that manages the information. I don't understand what that would accomplish exactly because it's all laid out. So the credit card is just a tool that's used to pay bills. We are not over or under the budgeted amount. As Mary has explained, depending on, so the budget has to do with different categories of expenditures and different things that are approved. The credit card is a tool to pay those bills. So that sometimes is for programming supplies, sometimes is used for vendors, etc. And so if some of those bills come in like at the beginning of the month or the end of the month, it depends on when that bill is then paid. So it's always going to be a little adjusted. That's why like the quarterly reports, you see whether they're on track. So we are not over or under in any particular month, but we could have Mary come explain that if you had it as an agenda item.
Well,
But-
here on the report that you provided us, we have an anticipated amount, which was $2,066.30.
Okay.
But the actual amount was significantly higher.
Wait, what? That's
We're looking at the April
concur.
2025 Christian County Library Adjustment Report.
right.
It says credit card.
It says credit card, there's a line item there.
Right.
I mean, if he's the treasurer, I think he should see the information that, I mean, the checks that he sees, that he's signing off for.
So
and see
if he wants
how the
the
costs would
credit
rise.
card bills, we can give him those. There are tons of them. But they're not paid. So, I mean, that's why it would need to be an agenda item so that we can explain to you how credit cards work. Right? Like, I mean, within the library system, it really wasn't a laugh line, but everyone who has spending responsibilities gets a credit card. They purchase whatever they are authorized within their budget to purchase. They have to go through the regular procedure of getting 3 different quotes and figuring out the best thing, getting approval from their supervisor. We then have this system that's on here called Concur, which is a triple check layer. So that actually, all credit card receipts go through there, come to the employee. The employee has to upload their actual receipts to that system to make sure that it matches what they spent. That then goes in a separate report from Concur to the supervisor. The supervisor has to approve it. Then it goes to Mary and the purchasing office, and they do a triple approval of to make sure it's all within budget. So none of it is without, I mean, from month to month, you might have one month where it's a little over and then it's a little under, but it just depends on what you're paying with the credit card. So
Sorry,
we're
can I
not
just
over
interrupt for a
budget.
second?
Yeah.
So why can't the treasurer see that?
See what?
The transactions, what I'm asking for in this
So,
motion, the
number
treasurer
one-
has
Uh-huh.
the fiduciary responsibility to review it. I need to see
It
it.
is right here. That's my
No, it's
whole
not
point.
here, it's a line item.
No, right, that is the line item is paying that bill. You're seeing what's being paid. in each of these things. So here, look, so here you've got this, the next report, that's why, again, if you came to the treasurer training, we go through all this with you, right? That's what Mary does in her training, she explains these reports. That's why it's really key that you try to come to that.
It's really key that you just listen to what I'm asking for
Oh my
and work with us.
Okay, well, here's what we can do. How about this? How about we put it as an agenda item so that you can properly make a motion for action? This is not, what you're asking is not allowed in, the consent agenda is about approving the estimated and the actual bills.
No,
Unless
we're
you're-
approving the report, and I'm not approving this report the way it is.
Okay,
I don't approve it.
okay, well, so that's what you can do. You can't demand these other things. That can be in a different
Yes, you
agenda
can.
item. Okay,
Well,
so,
I'm gonna
and
try-
what we
I'm
could
gonna
do
try to
is
request
this,
it with
if
the
you
board.
don't wanna come to
Please
a
stop.
treasurer training,
Please.
no,
John,
you're
she has the
asking
right to
me a
speak
question.
also.
I'm
Please.
not asking you a question. All I'm saying is, I want the data. I've been asking for it for a while now, and you don't seem to want to give it to me. I'm the treasurer, I need to have it.
You have asked for multiple different things, and we have encouraged you to come to the 101 training that we do for all new treasurers. You are the only one who has refused so far to do
I
that.
haven't refused, you never scheduled it.
John, we have asked you multiple times to try
Monday
and
through
schedule the
Friday,
training.
9 to 5,
Because
I'm
even
available.
Echo said when you first started that if you come to that and sit down so that Mary can talk through how these bills are put out, anybody's welcome to come to it. You would better understand what these reports show, and we are very happy to do that.
I know.
So
what
if
these
you would
report-
like, we could do that in an open meeting
Point
if
of
you'd like
order,
to put it.
please, point of order. That's enough. What we really need is to see the transactional data, and I'm calling the question. Are there any other comments, please?
I think when you say that's enough, it's a bit offensive because she's trying to share her point of view. I'm hearing your point of view. It seems like this needs to take a move past right here, that there does need to be a meeting with the treasurer and there does need to be explanations. I understand your question of why it says it's 2,066 anticipated and it was 4,888 actual. I understand that's a question, but I think that is something that you as a treasurer need to make an appointment with
I've tried.
So let's try again and get a calendar and make an appointment.
The appointment that you want to have is to come look at our QuickBooks, as you said, standing behind Mary. And that is not something that our auditor thinks is a good idea. Because it is stepping on the operational autonomy of the staff, which can be a problem for auditing purposes.
Well, it's a problem with
That portion.
statute. The statute requires I do it, so.
It does not, John.
It does.
It does
You want me
not.
to read it to you?
Sure, go ahead.
It says, the certification shall specify the amount paid, to whom the payment was made, and the purpose for which the payment is being made. That's 182.073. Also, in 182.075, the librarian and/or someone on our behalf shall furnish the board or any member thereof the financial records and accounts or summaries thereof, and this is an or,
Mhm.
that the board member or any member thereof may request. You're stopping.
So
this
any
from-
member can request as a motion
Which I
that is
have, and that's what
properly
I'm
noticed.
doing, and
Right,
that's what
and
I'm
it
doing.
needs
I'm
to be
making a
an
motion
agenda item.
I'm making a motion that we get that data.
Look, you're making a motion out of the agenda. You
No.
cannot make a motion for additional, you can make a motion to approve or not approve this report.
I've tried
If
it,
you want
I've
more
tried it as an
information,
administrative request for data, it failed, I didn't get it.
yes,
So
because
now
you
I'm
are
doing
one
it as a
person.
board-
I can give you as one
So
person
now I'm doing it
information.
as a board motion,
Yes, and that is the proper way to do it, but
And
it
that's what I'm
needs to
doing.
be its own agenda item
and
to
that's
make
what
that
I'm,
motion.
and that's what I'm doing.
It's
I'm
not
requesting.
its own agenda item, John.
So
You can
John,
call a
would you be
meeting for later this
comfortable-
week.
John, would you be comfortable that we have pulled these out for the consent agenda, that we move forward in approving the consent agenda with these removed and these tabled until our June meeting and to add it with these two reports?
And to add with this, and we can add an agenda item, explanation of how the credit cards work and bills, That will give us time to gather this information. We
How
will get the
credit cards
language
work,
from the
really?
auditor about what her concerns are. And Mary can come explain what she would normally explain in your training to everyone, and that's a good thing, because then there will be transparency.
I've owned QuickBooks, I know how it works.
John, you don't work for the library, sir.
No, all I'm asking for is the data.
You are
Why
a
you
trustee
arguing
of
with
the
me,
library. What I'm explaining to you is what you're asking is out of the scope of your job. You are supposed to have
please?
oversight.
Really?
Yes.
The treasurer
You are
does
supposed to
not
have
out of scope.
oversight. You are not supposed to be entering things into QuickBooks.
I never said I was gonna enter anything into QuickBooks.
You have been asking to come stand behind Mary and do QuickBooks with her. And that is not something that we do.
No,
She needs to have the
that's not
staff
what- that's not what the
autonomy
motion
to enter
says.
in things. We can provide reports anytime you want. That's what the law says, right? Must provide reports.
Now, Tori,
Yes.
you know, because I've been present at the meetings that we've had in the budget subcommittee, and I've heard the discussion going back and forth regarding just the request of
Sure.
information.
Sure.
You know, it's clear that John wants to have an understanding of what's going on, you know, with how the library's finances are being handled.
Sure.
John, you know, it would probably be beneficial to go to the treasurer's orientation, and then you know what kind of questions he's asking for. Is it possible for you to tailor some of the information that is
Absolutely.
presented so that he can have clarity on how the library operates?
Yes.
Because I did see an email where it did go out asking for, you know, another, you know, meetings to understand the finances, and I didn't see, maybe there wasn't a reply all to that response. But I think we need to find common ground. Clearly, you want the library to be fiscally responsible,
Correct.
and we just need to, you know, give each other a chance to see what this orientation is like, and
Yep.
you know the level of detail that he's requesting
Yes.
when it comes down to his role, because you know he's the one signing the checks, and so
Sure.
you know he could, you know, be under scrutiny should things not, you know, if things are not being handled properly.
Yeah, and in the interim, you know, if what you want is the credit card receipts, we can give those to you. That you haven't explicitly asked for that before, but today you are. So we could give that to you.
Yeah, could that be part of the orientation, like, you know, just
I
going
mean,
over
we
the
can
back-
do it, we have been trying to do it, so normally the executive director and Mary, so I think part of the other issue is for a moment you were asking Mary directly and you need to ask the
You were a
executive
copy.
director.
You weren't up.
Yes, but you need to ask me and then we work it out.
I
Okay?
said Mary and Tori, if you remember.
I understand, but the whole point is Mary conducts those with the executive director and they sit down and talk through what each of these things is. They answer those specific questions. Now we can do that beforehand, or we can come prepared to do that at the next board meeting. I mean, it's not bad to have, I really am always for transparency. So if the public wants to have that information, there's no reason why we can't do it as a part of a public meeting.
No,
To
this
me,
is not gonna be part of a public meeting because there's PII in there. She's told me that, and that's fine.
That's for what you were asking for a moment, which is totally different than this, was a complete
Yeah, I've
raw
changed-
download of our QuickBooks, which is not something
I
we can
changed it
provide.
because you said there was PII in there.
What
Now
is
it now
PII?
needs to be in person.
He's talking about people's, yes, so in person, we can talk through.
So let's do that. Can you schedule that? Because last time I tried
can
to
do
schedule it, you said,
Yes.
can we do that right now? This is your method in
Yeah,
this meeting?
I would like to, well, I mean, I don't know Mary's schedule, but we can try to do it, yes. Yeah.
So
Now,
what's
do
your
you
best
wanna
day?
do that and then have credit cards as an agenda item for the
This
June
is,
meeting?
so wait a minute, this is an administrative ask, this isn't an action item, this is part of your normal job. Her normal job, it's not an action item, I'm asking for clarity on the credit card line item.
You're
So-
giving me a list of things that I have to give you by a certain date, and you can't vote on it because it's not its own agenda item.
So pick me a date that I can come in and see that, I wanna make,
No, not to come see this, I can come give you the orientation and then we can talk through these issues, and if you still have questions, then we'll add it as an agenda item and come with answers to those questions.
That sounds fair.
Doesn't that make sense? In the meantime, like I said, you can check out the audit to find the list of credit card stuff, that's public.
How is that's not gonna be public.
It's listed in
Credit
the
card-
audit.
Credit card receipts are not
No,
posted.
not the receipts, the list of the
So
cards
what
and
you're
the
saying
people.
isn't true. The receipts are not posted public.
I wasn't talking about the receipts.
Well, that's what I've asked for.
Okay, well, that's part of what you've asked for. I'm talking about the first part here,
Can you
the
guys
total number of
schedule
things.
a
Yeah,
meeting?
let's schedule the meeting.
So that
So,
we can.
when do you have time to come, and then I'll have to verify with Mary, but I do like doing it now,
He
so
said
that we're here.
anytime Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Okay, well, it cannot be this week. Next week, we might be able to. If you're available all those days, I will check with Mary and see when we can do it.
Every day, 9 to 5.
Okay, great.
So John, would you like to add this as an agenda item for June? Right now, the consent agenda was approved without the April and May
I think
to be
what we could do is for the June agenda, I could take the fruits of that meeting and bring them.
I would love to hear what you learned.
So between now and June, we would title that agenda item appropriately based on what the topic of the conversation would be. And we would bring back the April and May reports for approval as part of our June packet,
Right.
correct? Yes. Okay. So would you like to temporarily withdraw this motion?
I think it's still a request to have the meeting date set. If orientation has to be part of it, fine, but that's not the goal. The goal is.
Okay, and
what I
just to
asked
be
for.
clear, it will not include a quick books in-person access. We can't just give individual trustees
I'm not
access to
asking
our
for
books.
access. No, I wanted to be present while it's being displayed.
Okay, well,
They call it eyes on glass, okay, so.
I understand, but we will print out reports for you to, it just feels a little creepy for you to stand behind Mary and watch her do it, and it makes us
We can
people
work
think.
that
I
out.
promise you I won't stand behind her.
That's the only way, so we will bring it in a report and we can talk through it, if
Okay,
that's
so
okay.
in June, you will report back to us with whatever was an appropriate agenda title item on what might be still an opportunity for additional discovery or where we land from that. So as of now, we have an approved consent agenda without those two reports in it.
Right.
So I believe that is what is on our agenda for that conversation.
What happens to his motion?
I had asked if, Joan, are you comfortable to withdraw your motion, the second motion for the credit card request? Because it is not part
Yeah,
of our
with
current.
the meeting set.
Right.
So we'll set that meeting and withdraw that second motion.
I know that the meeting is with John and Mary and Tori. I would like to put it on my calendar and know that it is happening. Can you CC
So-
all of us?
All of you can come, but then we have to make it an open meeting, which is fine.
No, I don't
You
want
can-
to come to the meeting. I just want to know that it is scheduled and
Ah.
happening.
I see, gotcha.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I want to know that it is scheduled and
So
happening.
that we're able to track kind of
Yes,
what happens, if
yes,
it happens.
yes. I feel that's
Yes, 'cause I have no
important.
interest in being.
I have no
there.
interest in being there.
But I would like to know that it's happening.
I want to know it's happening. Okay, thank you.
I would say if anybody has an interest in taking over the treasurer position when you guys redo, you switched it so June, that you might want to come now, because that's next month that you make votes to change officers.
How long is that meeting?
July.
I think Mary
Is it
usually
June
does
or
about an
July?
hour, and it kind of depends on how much experience people have with finances. So we did have one treasurer who was a banker, so that helped.
Yeah.
Because he had a bunch of background information. John has a bunch of finance information, so it may go quicker than he thinks. But it's just a way for you to ask those questions directly. And it does happen in the small meeting room, and we sit down and kind of just go through the reports and explain what's involved. And some of the things you've been asking Mary slowly as you sign checks, like what is this vendor? And by the way, from that budget committee, we did put together a preliminary list of some of the vendors. It's not all of them, but we were just waiting for those budget committees to start back up again as we talked about, so.
All right, well, I will move us back to our regularly scheduled agenda. Excuse me, the next item on there is administrative highlights with our local authors expo and one Nixa, one read. Corey?
It's Brandon
Sorry,
Jason.
Brandon, thank you.
Yeah, no, I didn't, I might not have put that in there, but Brandon Jason, our Nixa branch manager, is going to talk about the Authors Expo and also Nixa One Week this year. It's not working. Just talk loud.
It's a small room.
I don't know why. Yeah.
Phoebe, you have the slides? Okay, cool. So, yeah, I just wanted to give a quick report on this year's Local Authors Expo and.
You will have to speak louder,
One,
Brandon.
okay. I wanted to give a quick report on this year's Local Authors Expo and the One Nixa One Read initiative. So if you could advance, please. This year, our second annual Local Authors Expo took place on Saturday, April 19th. This year we had 33 regional authors attending. Like last year, they shared their works with the community and connected with a network of writers. Multiple age groups again were represented. We had people who write for children, young adult or teens, and adult. And then fiction, all genres you could imagine, nonfiction, picture books, and also some people with some fun bookish merchandise were there. Next slide. This was a really cool anecdotal story that we had. One set of the authors representing Wandering Reads. It's a new mobile bookshop that carries independent and local authors, as well as like bookish merchandise. They were inspired by last year's first event to go into business, and then this year they took part in our Authors Expo as well. So that was really cool. And then we also gave away a door prize to one lucky attendee that included local authors' books that were donated and then various bookish material, which was a lot of fun. So another great event, lots of good feedback. We'll definitely be doing it again. So next slide. Just some pictures, quick pictures from this year's local authors event.
Brandon?
Yes.
I have a question. How many of the authors that presented at this event were repeats from last year?
Repeats, yeah, there were, I don't have the exact number, but there were several because we kept their information and they all indicated last year that they would want to know about the next event that we had. So I would say probably, this is just an estimate, probably like 3/4 of the ones were returns, but we had some new people as well, which was exciting. I'm glad it wasn't the exact same, So yeah, good question. So yeah, just some quick photos of this year's event. It was cool. And then second thing that I had to announce is this year's One Nixa, One Read. So this is the third year that we're doing this initiative. It's a partnership between the library, Nixa Public Schools, and the city of Nixa. And this year we are reading Charlotte's Web. Next slide. Sorry. By E.B. White, of course. That's a classic book. It kind of it kind of goes over the themes of friendship, neighborliness, and some other kind of themes to introduce, especially younger readers too. And then next slide, please. The kickoff was last Thursday, May 22nd, so it's been very, very busy here. We had hot dogs served by the mayor of Nixa, free books, and a performance, actually the very last performance, as we found out, from CC Rhythm, at least currently. Their director for that program is retiring, so this was kind of at least her last performance with the group. And then in this room we had a community art project as well this year, which was a lot of fun. We're gonna debut that soon. Our youth services people are still putting that together from everyone's contributions to it. Wrapping up the One Read this year is Another Movie in the Park, this time Saturday, June 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a typo. Starting at 7 p.m. There will be a farmer's market kind of local vendors that we're contacting right now. We're gonna have the Library of Things yard games at the events and some food as well, again served by the mayor. And then we're gonna watch the more recent version of Charlotte's Web once the sun goes down. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then just some reminders for our first year of the One Read event. We read Wonder by R.J. Palacio. And then last year we did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl. You can see some photos there, again, of the mayor interacting, handing out books, handing out food. And then I think the last slide has just some more pictures again from last year. These are all from last year, but they are very representative of this year. So we had 332 attendees at this year's event. So it was a lot of fun. And that's what we've got going on. It's already a busy summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Did any of you get to go? I'm curious. I didn't get to go this year. It's a good one.
All right, the next item on our agenda takes us into public comment. So I want to thank the members of the public who are here to speak, to address the board. If their engagement in the process, if you signed up to speak tonight and you'd like to provide a handout, if you wouldn't mind doing that at this time, just to save us some time as we cycle through the group. As a reminder, our bylaws allow 60 minutes for public comment. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak. We'd ask that the audience please show respect to the speakers, keep commentary to their own allotted time, and refrain from interrupting those who are at the podium, especially since we will be shouting and not microphoning. So thank you all for your support and participation in the process. First speaker up, and then I'll announce the second as well so you can be ready. First speaker we have is Jeannie Lovewell. Second speaker is Juanita Bright.
And have patience with Dee Dee, it's her first time working the timer, so it's not as easy as it looks.
Forgot that part.
And I make it up occasionally, I'm trying to lower the temperature, it was too cold, now it's too hot, so.
I can run a good old-fashioned clock if you need it.
Oh, it's up there. Are you ready? Are you ready to start?
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Jeannie.
This morning, I got to do a lot of thinking about the library board. And if we had not have had the books in the library, we wouldn't have known the waste spending that has been done. And I have to commend you guys that got in there and realized that we were not to pay $30,000 to the government to tell us what to tell you what to do. Then you had a librarian. She told the board what was going on, and they might as well have been puppets because they just did whatever they wanted to do. Well, when we got the new library board, we had some people on there that used their brain about finances. And he was brave enough, and they were brave enough to say, we are not going to spend $30,000 to the government to tell us what to do. And the waste spending has been horrible here. And that isn't what needs to be done. So, all that is for evil to triumph is that nobody stands for the truth. And I'm thankful that we have a president that's a businessman, and he's conducting our business in Washington to cut the spending. Well, that's what we're doing. That's what they're doing here. And I appreciate it. This has been hard. I've been coming for about a year. I've missed one meeting because I was sick. But the books in the library have to go. They are going. It's going to happen. We're standing our ground. And we're watching our money. This is our taxpayer money. That's our money. Not just the library to do what they want. You've got to do what's right. And evil, we can't do evil for good and good for evil anymore. We have to line up with God and do what we're supposed to do in every organization in Christian County. I'm done.
Juanita is up next, and after that, Kevin Wright.
For the April Library Board meeting, I chose to focus my 3-minute public comment on my hope for the future of our library. I spoke about the work that the subcommittees are doing, streamlining and itemizing the budget and adjusting the bylaws to become more efficiently and effectively representing the culture and the citizens of Christian County. I spoke about the ridiculous over-the-top lawfare that has been used against 3 of our board members all over a supposed procedural infraction during a meeting, something that the previous fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants board did routinely. And finally, I recalled and spoke about that board that was in place 2 years ago, the board that shockingly not only would not listen, but even admonish the citizens who spoke against the age-inappropriate books that had been found scattered and unregulated throughout the children's sections. I ended my comment by thanking Echo, Diana, John, and Mary for bravely stepping up and starting to bring Christian County values back to the library again. And Janice, I appreciate your concern for the cave. That was kind what you said to me tonight. And this is nothing personal, but this needs said. This has to do with not speaking for someone after a public comment. Now you can imagine how surprised and irritated I was after the public comments were over and the board meeting began, when one of the board members actually brought up my 3-minute speech, calling me by name, declaring that my speech had been all about transparency. And then she used that statement as a springboard to launch a verbal attack on the 3 board members that I had just thanked, complaining that they were not being transparent in including her in everything, despite the fact that she'd made it clear that she didn't want to be on either subcommittee. I also find it ironic that she would be concerned about transparency when she herself was not being transparent by colluding with the previous tax-paid library attorney without consulting the other board members. She then launched a lawsuit against them using the library attorney without a vote of the board. She then tried to settle the taxpayers with much of her legal expenses. That's what I call infraction. I thought about addressing her before I left last month, face to face, but I thought, no, she did this to me publicly, so I need to address this publicly. And I'm going to try to be as polite and respectful as possible. Don't ever speak for me again, Janice. Don't put words in my mouth. I don't need anybody to edit or translate or interpret anything that I have to say. I speak pretty clearly. And I certainly don't appreciate someone using the interpretation of what I said as a weapon to beat those 3 over the head, when honestly, you're doing it, what you're doing, you're more of the guilty party. And one more thing, you were on that liberal, uncooperative board 2 years ago that I spoke about. The buck needs to stop right here and right now. And honestly, it needs to stop with you.
Kevin Bright, you
I'm
are.
gonna go ahead and pass, I'm just gonna let that stand, I agree with what Juanita said.
Mike Miller, then you are our next speaker this evening, and after that, Reggie Mitchum.
Good evening. I'd like to share a quote from a man reflecting on his childhood. I shall never forget the enjoyment and the instruction I gained from libraries when I was too poor to buy books myself. Reflecting on this person, the author wrote, as a 12-year-old working as a bobbin boy in a textile mill, this boy was giving access to the private library of a man known as Colonel Anderson, which offered to lend books to workers every Saturday. He only had about 400 volumes in his library, but they were valuable books. The man, Andrew Carnegie. Years later, starting in 1881, with a gift of a library to his birthplace in Scotland, Carnegie, and then later his foundation, gave roughly $56 million to build 2,500 public libraries. Of these libraries, 1,681 were built in the United States. Our neighbors in Joplin, Aurora, Marshfield, Carthage, Bolivar, and Springfield all benefited by the generosity of Carnegie in the early 1900s. As you move forward with our new director and the new focus that you have, I just please urge you to do all you can to help the staff and team here to keep adding good and valuable books to our library collection and honor Carnegie's legacy, because the next Andrew Carnegie just might be in our midst.
Reggie Miller, you are our final speaker this evening.
Well, good evening. Once again, I want to say thank you for all the time and effort that you put in. I just wanted to mention, I know starting June the 1st is Gay Pride Month. I was totally shocked 2 years ago, 1st of June, when I walked into the Sparta Library, went back to the children's department, and there was these books displayed, of course, just the right height for children to see. And I started looking at some of the titles, and was I ever amazed. I thought, how in the world is this stuff put out in front of children like this? And there were several people in Christian County let their voice be heard. And because of it, last year it was not a display. And I don't know for sure about this year, but I would just like to recommend keep them books out of there. If the parents want their children to have these books, that's fine, but put them up in the air somewhere where mom has to hand them down to children. I was in the Sparta Library one day, and there was a mother and two little children come in. Mom stopped right at the front desk, and here's the children, headed right back to the children's department, facing these books, looking them right square in the eye. It's intentionally set up to try to destroy the lives of children. That's what many of us are here for. So I just ask you, please do your part to help protect the children in Christian County.
Yes.
And this guy over here on the end, you remind me of somebody on TV. I think his name's Leon Musk. Keep digging, brother. Keep digging. People try to hide stuff that much, there's usually something there that needs to be uncovered, so stay at it.
All right, so that will take us to the end of our public comment for this evening. All right, so first item on old business this evening is a resource sharing software update. So Tori, I will yield the floor to you.
All right, so in April, I told you we were starting a closed test of the new Mobius software, which is upgraded and rebuilt. Again, just to review, the reason that Mobius did that, which has taken way longer than any of us wanted it to take, was to try and disconnect it, because at that time the software is only compatible with Sierra, which is our operating system here, and they wanted to open it up to other libraries that use other operating systems, right? So that there could be a wider use of resource sharing for non-Sierra libraries. So that was the whole goal a year and a half ago, and they thought, I think naively, that hiring a web developer, a software developer would be a quicker process, and it has taken a really long time. But as you know, in April, we went ahead and were able to start doing closed testing. So what that meant was, I think April 15th, we had staff, we created a special subgroup within the system for staff and a couple super users to try and start kind of mimicking what it would be like to request to kind of see if the system worked and uncover any things. And you may remember my update then was, we're very hopeful it'll only be a couple weeks. We may even launch by May. Unfortunately, by May, and fortunately, I suppose, since it was a closed test, we found a few issues, as did other libraries that were going through that process. So we reported them, they fixed them, we tried it again, it worked better. So starting last Monday, so that was about a little over 4 weeks, we had closed testing from April 15th to about the 19th. On the 19th, we've moved into open testing. Now, we haven't done a wide press release going back to a couple meetings or anything like that, because we don't want everybody jumping on the system if it's not yet a viable system. So we're just trying to make sure that it functions, that staff understand any new procedures. We were sort of billed from Mobius that it should look basically the same. The real difference is going to be that it allows more libraries to get involved, because it's not just tied to this one operating system. So we did open that up. So anybody who wants to test, now anybody with a library card, so staff or whatever, I know Mary, you've used it. Have you tested it?
I tested it.
Yeah.
Because when I saw the Springfield Library's announcement, I thought, I wonder if this is something we can do.
And I'll get to that. This was a
Yes.
part of my update anyway, so I was
And
pleased.
And I
Yes.
saw that
Yeah, what did you notice? Because we already have some complaints with the open testing that we're reporting.
it's not recognizing me as a user.
Oh.
So
Now that's something we can work on. You should talk to library staff.
Okay.
Did you try that yet?
No, because it was I wanted to see what you had to say.
So for
I
that-
figured it was
Yeah, so anybody now, and this is just
Glitchy.
since last Monday, we just kind of, in a temporary way, we figured people would find it because people are anxious without even announcing it, but we didn't want kind of all the Mobius users to get on in the case that we decide not to continue. But we want to give it a real shot. As you guys remember, we are not paying anything through the end of June. So we wanted to give it a real go and give the developers a chance to do, what they promised to do. So for that issue, it would really help us if you have tried and had any issues like that, talk to Front, because we do have people who've been using it. So some things, for example, that we have noticed that they're still working on are renewals are not working. So they have in the interim adjusted the time period so that people have them out, and they say that will be done within a week. So we're just kind of trying to make sure that it is a functional system before we continue with them as a thing. So at the same time, our sister, kind of big sister library, Springfield Green, with whom we share Sierra. So all of those fees are shared fees. We are a part of a consortium with Springfield Green for our operating system. They use a bigger chunk of it, and then annually we pay them roughly $30,000 to access that. So in your budgets, when you see the consortium line item, it's about $48,000.
That's what it is.
Okay, it's the consortium line item. There are 3 things in your consortium line item, okay? So these are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we do discuss in the budget committee meeting, like what are in the budget categories, not like what QuickBooks looks like, but what are the topics that are represented in the budget category. So in there you have our portion of Sierra annually to Springfield Green for this year is about $29,500, so right at $30,000. The other consortium we belong to is for Missouri Libraries to Go, which is shared ebooks just with other Missouri libraries. We pay $2,000 a year for that, just to belong to that network, basically. And for the little interface, if anybody uses Missouri Libraries to Go, yeah, there's a little, so just for that, but it's not all of our ebooks, just those. So that's a cheap, affordable thing. And then the amount budgeted, even though we didn't pay it last year, we paid it and it was refunded for, is the rest of that. So about $16,500 basically for Mobius is about how much Mobius costs per year, okay? Now you may remember, this is gonna take us way back to when you started this conversation with Renee around Evergreen and other resource sharing things. So remember, Evergreen is its own resource sharing consortium and ILS. So it has the system of cataloging clumped together with resource sharing as one thing. They are not separatable. It's like if you get in there, you get that. Now, if Mobius's upgrade works, those libraries could also pay another $16,500 or whatever it costs for their library to join Mobius too. That was Mobius's whole goal, is that people can have more than one resource sharing platform if they disentangle themselves, right, from their ILS. Whereas Evergreen is still kind of like how Mobius was before this with Sierra. They're one and you can't separate them. So Evergreen's resource sharing and its ILS are one thing, right? So we can't buy into just their resource sharing unless we also take on their ILS. I'm just trying to make sure everybody understands because it's pretty complex. Okay, so that would be one option, but we would have to change our entire cataloging system if we shifted to that. Renee mentioned another option was the one that we've been using as a stopgap, and when she left in January, she was hopeful it wouldn't last past when she left, but unfortunately it has, which is to just use the OCLC or what they call the interlibrary loan. What most people know, since about the 90s, libraries all around the country have a system of interlibrary loan where you can borrow through that. So we have been using that. There was a free module in there that we hadn't activated until the last couple months that made it a little easier for people to request. And that's what you were talking about. Mary, at least, was talking about how she had tried that out. It was easier. It still is always going to take things longer to come from interlibrary loan because it's a much bigger network. And sometimes there's a little bit more mailing cost because we are responsible for mailing things out and mailing things back. So if we're mailing now if Mobius expands, that could be the case for Mobius too, but Mobius is a little bit more regional. So the postage involved is not usually to California or Florida, it's Arkansas or Oklahoma, so there's slight margins, but not too big of a deal. So what Renee had mentioned, I feel like it was maybe the October meeting last year, was that another thing that we could maybe do, which is what Springfield Green did in January, is buy an additional module that does cost additional money to layer on top of interlibrary loan. It is the same product. It's still an OCLC product. And it's just in addition to the free module we activated that we didn't have to pay extra for. you can pay an additional, so it is for the first year for us, it's different for every library. To get to PASA, it would be an additional about $10,200 for the year. That includes about $7,500 for just the resource sharing. And basically all it does, it doesn't expand the amount of libraries that you can borrow from. It just puts a much nicer user interface than we have. So it doesn't increase the speed. There's no additional like express delivery, so the time would be the same. But the interface is closer and even nicer, could be argued, than Mobius's, in that it has what I think a lot of modern users would love Mobius to finally get to. And it was not a part of what Mobius has promised, but similar to what you have when you do a FedEx package. So it'll say, we found your item, it'll show like a little graphic, it is, you know, being shipped, it's delivered, so it helps you track. It still takes a long time, but there's like a visual thing that they've added to it to make it. So it is cool. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's cool.
What is the name of it?
It is called TIPASA, TIPASA. So this is like an additional product to layer on. And at that time, Renee said, depending on what happens, we could build into the budget, but so the breakdown of that cost is, it's about $7,500. There's a $1,500 additional fee that we have to pay to, for something called a CSIP server to be able to run that program, and that we have to pay to Springfield Green. They'd have to configure it within so that the TIPASA cool UPS looking interface can run on Sierra's system. And that is an annual fee that you have to pay. There's also a $1,200 setup fee. So the $1,500 is annual, the $1,200 is a one-time setup. If we do that, we can then use TIPASA for as long as we're using it. So for this first year, if we did do what Springfield Green is doing, walked away from Mobius. So right now in 2025's budget, we have about 16.5, 16.8, something like that for Mobius. So we could instead spend about 10.2 to get to PASA instead. We don't have it budgeted to do both. That is something that a new director could look into to see whether they wanted to move around money so that we have both, because then you have access to both systems, but it would be a bit of an either or choice, okay? So what we would like to do is continue the due diligence, or this is the current plan, spend more than just 1 week. So go ahead and give Mobius the benefit of the doubt. We've been with them this long. Go ahead and give them another couple weeks to see whether the features that we need are going to be able to be accessible. So Springfield Green has much more complicated software needs because they have a much, much larger library system. They lend a lot more of their books than we lend. So it just is a much more complicated thing. So a lot of the bells and whistles that they need to make it worth it to have Mobius, we don't need. So it just like, we can still use Mobius and sometimes they can't. So just because they have it doesn't mean that we necessarily need it. But I think that some of these things that we do want to see, like making sure that, you know, it's still usable, it looks basically like the old Mobius, that we can work out some of these things like renewals, and some of the back-end records don't automatically clean themselves off now. We would have to do that manually. So like some kind of back-end things that we're trying to make sure they can do. Then we could make the decision before the end of June to instead spend the budgeted money on that. And this wouldn't have to be a board decision because it's already budgeted under consortium. So it's not a new item. It doesn't go over any of the limits to have any kind of vote. And it's not really a new thing. It would just be, this is the best option for resource sharing. So that's a decision that staff will make, and that's how Springfield Green did it too. They did inform their board at their board meeting before they made the switch, just so that they knew what was going on. So it was a pretty last minute decision for them. So I was gonna talk about it anyway, just so that you guys knew. But there's an added wrinkle, which is that when I say OCLC interlibrary loan is free, it is not free. The base service, including the extra module that we activated, is paid for by our state library through federal funding, which right now is frozen. So this is the IMLS funding that everyone talks about. I think they have gotten half of that money for this year because it was already allocated by Congress. It has been frozen, but a couple court cases I think have just said they have to give the other half. So the other thing we want to wait a couple weeks to find out before we make a final decision is whether or not that core money that's funding what is free for us now for interlibrary loan is gonna be released, because that is an additional $12,000 a year that the state library pays for us. It's actually a little less, 11,300 or something. But it means that the total cost, if we had to pay for all of it out of pocket as a Mobius alternative, Mobius, like as a whole package, is like 16,800 or 16,500 mostly. And then, you know, the entirety, if we had to pay that back end too, is more like 21, which is out of budget. That would have to be something that I would need to bring to the board, because that's something that is not approved. And you'd have to decide whether you wanted whether you just wanted to get rid of all resource sharing and put in a higher amount in the budget, whether you would want your director, who then hopefully would be a different person eventually, whether you want them to try to look at the budget and come to you with a proposal and maybe pass an interim budget. I do think all indications as of today are that at least for the next year, that base amount for OCLC will be changed. Now, OCLC, as Springfield says, has a much larger library system, has a much larger reach. So you're talking about tens of thousands of libraries. Again, it's always gonna cost a little more for shipping and take a little bit longer. But most public libraries in the entire country have their base interlibrary loan funds paid with federal funding. So if there is a world in which that federal funding is permanently cut, it will likely drastically reduce the amount of libraries that are participating in interlibrary loan, because most of them, like us, don't pay anything for that. So for us, that's why it was the backup, because we just kind of have it and people use it as if it's a given, but it's something, and it is a given, but it's sort of like a hidden cost that we don't see. So that's like a super long, complicated, but I just wanted to make sure you guys knew the whole story and the whole reason why we want a couple more weeks to see if Mobius can kind of get these last minute things together to find out for sure, or as certain as we can be, that the second half of federal IMLS funding for the 25 year is released or likely to be released, so that then all we would be doing if we decide not to proceed with Mobius is just purchasing that 7,500 plus 1,500 plus 1,200 module for to PASA. And then I think what does need to happen is whomever the next director is, which I know comes next on the agenda, so I don't wanna, but whomever that person is, I think when it gets to budgeting time, if it were me, I would probably budget, I don't know, I would look at the landscape of it and maybe budget for the higher amount. If we're using TPASA, maybe budget, like I try to encourage administrators to budget if they're gonna ask for a grant for the whole amount, and then if we get the grant, then we just try to find somewhere else to use that money so that we're not out of money. But instead of budgeting 16.5 like we would for, because Mobius is the one we're using, you budget, and it wouldn't be 21 the second year, it would be minus that $1,200 setup fee. Yeah.
Now, let's say Mobius gets their act together.
Yep.
And it's up and running. Are we gonna be responsible for paying the full 16,000 this year, or are we, you know, what kind of contract would be the expectation that we would need to sign at that point?
So the contract, they haven't released it yet, but it would be July 1st, and because it's a June to June year for them, so it would be July 1st through the next year. And it would be the full amount. So it would be, I think this year it's 16, I looked it up before.
So these are yearly contracts?
It is an annual contract. They have, I haven't seen what they're doing this year. In the past, they've had, you have to give at least 1 year's notice to exit, which most of these consortiums do that because otherwise people could just leave at any time and no one can guarantee who's in it, basically. They waived all of that during the development. So that's why we were able to get refunded, and that's why Springfield was able to cancel. So if we do cancel, it'll be before July 1st. So this is a decision I would rather leave for a new director, but it's not gonna be the case. We're gonna have to make this decision based on input from the public, which certainly get on there and try and use it, and the staff, about what is the right move, and then they can do it. Another thing I will add is that Springfield Green did start paying because they have a much larger budget. So it's, to them, that extra 10 grand to add on to PASA is no big deal. They went ahead and started paying that in January, or they signed a contract in January so that they could potentially have both, like some libraries might do. They didn't actually kind of activate it, but once they told them they wanted to activate, there's still a time period before it can be implemented, just like we're going through with Mobius here, because you have to get it up on all of the servers, you have to train staff, you have to let them release it. Now, for how it works with TPASA and OCLC, if you pay for that extra module, you sign the contract. So Springfield Green signed it in January. They didn't move very quickly because they were really hoping Mobius would come back soon and they wouldn't even have to use it. You don't start paying until you actually use it. But we did talk to them, given the uncertainty of all this situation, and if before July 1st or right after July 1st, we signed a contract for that extra module, they think it would be September-ish before we could get it actually open to the public. So that's another drawback. If Mobius can get it together, it's open now, it just is a matter of getting it to be better. Now, in the interim, we would still have interlibrary loan like we're using now, but the new interface would be probably September, October, maybe at the latest. But again, we wouldn't pay that annual bill, that extra 10-2 until that time.
Have you heard complaints from people other than me about missing Mobius and?
Oh my gosh, yes. It is a beloved, resource sharing is a beloved resource. I mean, it really is. If anything will change the federal funding situation, I think resource sharing is one of the things that honestly could push that envelope in terms of people wanting federal funds to be given to the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences, because it really does help individual libraries be able to provide that, especially the smaller, we're a medium-sized library, just barely now, we're not a small library, but some small libraries, these numbers we're talking about here seem big to us, and just like with Springfield Green, they seem tiny, but some of these numbers are completely out of reach. If they didn't have free interlibrary loan, they just wouldn't loan books to other libraries or get books from other libraries. So it will drastically change the landscape of resource sharing nationally if those funds are no longer available. I think most libraries will do what I'm recommending, which is try to find things to displace in the budget in order to keep it going. But it'll mean there's less resource sharing, for sure. It will change the way that that's done, and maybe a new system we don't know about will grow out of it. I'm not saying it'll necessarily be worse, but it will be different. And we haven't had anybody with that issue yet, that you can't log on. You should just be able to use your card.
I noticed it was very slow. I typed in, my searches, and it was not the Mobius that we had last year.
Yep.
That was an antiquated system. This looked a little bit more antiquated, if that's even possible.
Yep.
And then when I tried to I wanted to go through the motions to give you feedback.
Please.
When I tried
we really do want people to do that.
to
Even if
reserve
it's
a book, it wasn't recognizing me. And I have things already saved on a chain on my computer, and it wasn't.
Well, I don't want to bother you, but if you have time and you can send a few screenshots, send whoever your branch manager is, send it to them.
Okay, I'll do that.
And they will send it immediately to our resource sharing department.
Okay.
And then, because we are providing all of that in real time to Mobius.
Yeah, because it would be nice to have something up and running at the start of the school year.
Yes.
Because we've done the best we can. But
Yeah.
I know that there's other people that are missing the access to the resources.
Yeah. And it's possible that it could be before that. I just don't want to overpromise. And I will say, even though Springfield Green started paying or signed the contract in January, I really don't think it's till the last couple months that they did some of the back end. So it's similar to Evergreen, but Evergreen would take even longer because it's like a couple year process to get on their waiting list, become a part of the cohort, get the state funding. And again, just to go back to that Evergreen conversation, and Renee said this too, Evergreen is a possibility for our library someday. It's just a big decision. The problem with Evergreen is that is completely funded by federal money for the libraries in the state who use it, 100%. And that's for their version of Sierra and their resource sharing. So what our state library has done is prioritize those libraries, knowing they don't have any way to even catalog their books if that funding is lost. And they have used that first half that they have received going toward those Evergreen libraries. So they are covered for the next year.
Okay.
But in terms of I was trying to explain to staff how complicated this is. It's sort of like there's these three, and there's a few other possibilities, but there's kind of these three main boats of resource sharing that are out there. And if you're trying to figure out which boat is the safest to jump in, it's really unclear. Like you would think, like, let's all go jump in Evergreen, but that system, to get into that system, it could take 2 or 3 years to get on their waiting list, to get the federal, or to get the state grant if we're allowed, to change all of our cataloging and call numbers. And so 2 to 3 years, who knows if the federal funding will be there, right? Same thing, we all go into the interlibrary loan, but then if that funding is cut, that's gonna be a smaller system. We could jump into Mobius, which may not be quite ready yet, but it is kind of independent. So there could be a world in which we make a decision to go ahead and add to PASA, for example, if Mobius is not up to par yet. That's also a yearly contract with the PASA, right? So we sign that up. The thing we would lose is the one-time setup fee. We wouldn't get that $1,200 back, right? And then next year, let's say Mobius gets it together. Maybe a lot more libraries jump to that boat if some of these other boats go down, or they decide to get in and they have more time to refine it. It could be a time where then notice is given to this one and we move over to Mobius. So Mobius they're not gonna give up, they're definitely doing it. And I think that they're thinking of trying to untangle themselves technologically from just one ILS, which is like the cataloging system, is a smart future thinking idea. But I agree with you, I would have announced to the public in the press release and everything we talked about that it was happening already if we thought it was ready, and that's why we haven't done that yet. So the update is, give us a few weeks and we'll see. Please try it out for those who are here tonight or hear this. If it's bad, don't be shy. I mean, feel free to take screenshots because we send all of that to Mobius and their developer, and that's the only way they know it. I mean, we're not the only, all the libraries are testing it, but every library has unique users and needs, so there really is other feedback. So it's a really long explanation, but how about besides Mary, others because it is really complicated, but did that make sense? My actual plan was not to give all the information, but I really feel like it's hard for you to understand how complex this decision is without having that.
Well, especially if you're gonna have to make a decision. I mean, it's nice that we at least have been prepped with.
Yes,
You're
so
gonna
we will make a
a call.
decision, and like I said, if the federal funding does not come through, so there are now 2 court orders saying that second half has to be paid for this year. If for some reason that doesn't come through, it'll probably be around September that check doesn't come to the state library, and then your new director at that time may have to come to you with like, okay, now we have contracted for the extra add-on, and either we just need to find a way to get out of that, or we need to find in the budget the base part of that. So just so you know, that could be an eventuality. So,
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? John, do you have any questions? No. Janice?
That was very thorough.
Okay. Good.
All right, we can move to the first item of new business. Pardon my voice, we'll try hard. Our open trustee position for the East County. I will just sort of read that information for you all. Christian County Library Board of Trustees has 1 trustee position representing the East County District that will be appointed to begin service July 2025. For East Christian County, that is the Sparta area, West Benton, East Benton, Sparta, Bruner, Oldfield, Lead Hill, Chadwick, Garrison, and Seneca. The Christian County Library Board of Trustees is a non-elected board of 5 registered voters who cannot be elected officials and must reside in Christian County. Trustees are appointed to a renewable 4-year term and may not receive compensation. Trustees are appointed to the Christian County by the Christian County Commissioners in accordance with Missouri State Statute 182.050. To be considered for the 2025 appointment, please visit christiancountymo.gov/Commission Library Board. There you will be able to print an application and will need to return it to the Christian County Commissioner's office located at 100 West Church Street, room 100 in Ozark, Missouri, in person or by mail, no later than 4:30 p.m. on June the 2nd, 2025. Please contact the County Commissioner's office if there are any questions. Commissioners will meet with each qualified candidate the week of June 9th through the 13th, 2025. Commissioners will vote on the candidate on June 19th, 2025 during their regular meeting. After being appointed, candidates will be available to proceed with ongoing orientation and be ready to join the Board of Trustees. Any questions for anyone on any of that?
In the packet, I just printed out the webpage, so you can just have the URL in case anybody wants to go and download the application. And they're 4-year terms,
Thank
did
you.
you say that? Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
I am. Yep, great.
Did you want me to go back to that?
You're good, thank you. For us visual learners, appreciate that. All right, our last item of new business is the executive director search update and next steps. I will again read a statement. Christian County Library Board of Trustees has been working diligently since January to hire a new executive director to oversee the library operations under the board's direction. I'm grateful to the board and to the library staff who participated in numerous meetings to establish our hiring process and see it through to completion. Through comprehensive recruiting efforts in our community and through the broader library network, we attracted nearly 40 candidates for consideration. Over recent months, we, the board, have narrowed the field of qualified candidates through written and phone interviews, followed by in-person interviews that included the library branch tours and formal presentations to the board. At the end of that process, the board voted to extend an offer to Will Blydenberg, which he has accepted pending background checks and contracts, etc. Will is scheduled to begin at our next, as our next Christian County Library Executive Director sometime later this summer. The board was impressed with Will's background, current career achievements, and his compelling vision for creating an even stronger future for Christian County Library. His collaborative approach and innovative ideas will help us expand our services, enhance our community engagement, and establish Christian County Library as a leading library system in Southwest Missouri for years to come. We look forward to sharing more details once Will joins us. And again, I thank the board, the staff, and all of the candidates who have participated in this important process and decision for our library's future. And with that, our meeting is now adjourned.